So we're here for episode 12, and Rebecca, you're looking remarkably nervous. Why are you looking so nervous?
I'm a bit sweaty. I got sweaty hands.
Why have you got sweaty hands?
I don't know.
Is it because you suddenly started obsessing looking for spiders?
Well, you just brought up a spider for no reason, and now I've got anxiety that a spider's going to drop on me.
There's nothing wrong with spiders. Spiders are really important. Did I tell you, actually, one time Vivian asked me to take a spider and take it out, you know? So I got the spider, I took it to a bar, I had a nice conversation. Lovely chap, wanted to be a web developer.
I've actually read that somewhere. Where have I read that?
That is not a good reaction to a great joke.
I've read it somewhere. Have you ever lost your suitcase?
I've not, but the airline company has.
Technically, that's you losing your suitcase.
Well, I mean, I gave it to the airline company and it didn't get to the destination. So I did get it back eventually.
So what would you say if there was like a new AI that had been developed to find your lost suitcase?
I'd say that it's a strange use of an AI. The reason
it's
being...
It's amazing.
Well, no, because see... Realistically, this is kind of a logistical problem that computers are already very good at. AIs are really good at fuzzy things. So fuzzy things being where it's less about logic, it's more about interpretation. So things like visual or incredibly complex logical problems or chaotic problems. For example, looking at a picture and saying, is that a girl or a boy? Or how old is the person in it? It's not easy for you just to logically look at pixels and analyze that and say what it is. You have to make almost a values judgment. Right? That's where an AI is good because it's a fuzzy logic. It's not 100% yes or no. This is 80% likely to be a boy. It's not 100% likely to be a boy because you can't tell for sure just by looking at a picture. Right? It's their age is probably around 55 years old. It's not a guarantee, right? That's where AIs are good. Where a piece of luggage is, for example, in a system, should be just trackable by just having good recording and meters, and it's something computers are very good at. It's not a complex problem necessarily.
Yeah, well, you've got people involved.
Yeah, I think that's probably why they need an AI now. And I think it's probably because the system just keeps on failing. People don't check things in, or they don't put things in the right stuff. They don't scan things.
Do you not get extremely happy when you see your suitcase like fall onto the belt and you're just like, yes?
Normally not, because it's normally been manhandled at the time by somebody in the rain and dropped in a puddle at the same time or something like that.
How do you know?
We can sometimes see. I've never looked out the airplane window as you've seen them like just throwing luggage around and you're thinking, well, I'm glad I didn't put anything in that matters.
I always try and look on the trolley and see if I can see my suitcase and like I can like rest easy.
Yeah, I think most of the times when you lose luggage it's because your plane's been delayed or you had a short change. It's very rare, I think, you lose luggage when you got on the plane you expected to get on at the time you expected to get on and it was a single stop. I think when you do multiple transfers and there were short periods between them, then sometimes things go missing. But overall, the systems are pretty good. I think the vast majority of luggage gets to where it's supposed to go. Now, where an AI can be useful, though, I mean, it can be quicker because it is quite a complex logistical problem, but you can solve it. So you can solve it without necessarily jumping to machine learning and stuff, but machine learning might give insights where all other things have failed. So it could pick up that kind of scenario you picked up, which is a human error where somebody just swapped the tags. It could say, well, actually, we noticed somebody else lost their luggage and their start times were exactly the same, or, they effectively flew out the same location at roughly the same point. And so there's a possibility here that, that somebody swapped the tags. And so maybe your luggage went to that other person's destination and vice versa, and maybe that's how we can unite these luggages back. And that's kind of stuff that machine learning and AIs can pick up those tricks without necessarily understanding that's why.
We're saying now, like, instead of searching on CCTV, say for me, they can now put into the system brown hair and blonde, actually, black shirt, skirt, yellow shoes. And then it can find me. I
think this is again one of those where the promise of AI and the reality are not currently always in step. So, for example, you see all these like films and TV series on that. At the same time, I think there was a report on BBC News just earlier this week of I haven't got the details in front of me, but from what I recall, like an AI had been run, IBM Watson or something, or one of the big AIs had identified half the members of Congress as criminals.
I saw that.
Yeah, but that's a good example of that's you can overtrain AIs, and so you can get what looks like a lot of good positives, but you end up getting a lot of false positives as well. So yeah, they could say that there is I don't know how to describe you, because brunette doesn't seem to work at the moment. You seem to have got multiple hair colours.
I'm like blonde, silver, brown.
Ambiguous.
I'm not ambiguous.
You could put an ambiguously haired, ambiguous looking. So Jack's back. Hi, Jack.
Hi, Jack.
We've got more questions.
Yes. So first week I asked you for just general advice for a new developer. Last week I asked you for advice in debugging and solving any problems you might have.
Uh-huh.
I think the next place to go is to ask about testing and unit tests and peer testing, and if you have any advice on making sure you've got a complete set of tests to minimize any bugs that we get through.
Yes, there's lots of kind of testing, and you mentioned peer testing then. It's probably worth just quickly enumerating some of the different forms. So we have something we call unit testing, which is really developer testing their own code and testing the element of work that they're doing. Really, unit testing means testing the unit that you've built, or testing the little piece of functionality you've just built.
Yeah.
And writing tests that are targeted at a very small subset of the overall system functionality, largely around the thing you've just changed.
So instead of checking that everything still works, I've changed this a little bit, let's make sure it's doing what I expect.
So what you're doing actually does what you thought it was doing.
Yeah.
And unit testing is one form of testing. We in our company, we actually have the developer focus on the unit testing first, i.e. make sure that what you built is what you intended to build. And then we have something that we call peer testing, and peer testing is quite a common name for it, which is where you have another developer test your code.
Yeah.
Some companies use the word peer testing and they use dedicated testers to do peer testing. We actually believe passionately that developers should test each other's code.
Yeah.
We don't have dedicated testers, and we're quite passionate about that. We believe that to be a good developer, you should also be good at testing, and to be a good tester, you should be good at developing. Yeah. So for this kind of testing anyway. And peer testing will largely also cover unit testing in terms of the kind of stuff it's testing, but it's done by a different person.
Yeah.
And they're hopefully going to think of things in a different way than you and find things that you didn't think of. And then we also have something called regression testing, although that's basically more like system testing or testing holistically the whole thing. So
is that a term that other companies use? Right?
Yes, the term regression testing gets used. We use it slightly more broadly than some people use it, but the idea is that the system has not regressed, it's not got worse.
Okay, yeah.
But realistic is like a holistic test. It's test everything.
Yeah.
And the idea there is to make sure that the new piece of functionality you didn't add didn't break something in an unrelated part of the system.
Yeah.
Or if you've genuinely built it as a unit, that should be impossible. But the real world is very different. So you don't just make the assumption that because somebody created something in this part of the system, it didn't impact something somewhere else. And regression testing says, look through the core bits of the system, the main use cases. Now, actually, this is another terminology we use across all forms of testing, which is use cases. And use cases are, how does the system get used?
Yeah.
So if you think of Facebook, for example, people will scroll up and down and be able to see posts.
Yeah.
So a regression test might say, make sure that after you've changed this, you can still scroll up and down.
Yeah.
And you can still see posts, and they're still in a sensible order. And also things like a use case might be, you need to be able to add a new post.
Yeah.
So you'd try adding a new post to make sure that it doesn't break. It still works.
Then if those succeed, you've covered the basic use of Facebook for most of the people.
What you're doing is you're picking out use cases, and then you prioritize use cases based on how commonly they occur.
Yeah.
And how important they therefore are. And in that scenario, for example, adding a post, reading posts, they're going to be common use cases for Facebook.
Yeah.
Changing a security setting is also a use case.
Yeah.
But is a less common use case, and therefore maybe a lower priority use case.
So would you expect to test every part of the functionality, or
you
make a decision as to what's worthwhile testing?
It depends on what you're testing. If you're testing a very simple application, for example, that's only got a few pieces, only got maybe 10 or 15 use cases in it, you might test all of them every time because it doesn't take that long. What you're doing in much more complex large systems is you test all the high priority use cases. So these are the things that people do all the time.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing worse than you release a bit of code and it breaks something obvious.
Yeah.
People are like, you've never tested this. Like, well, we have tested it.
We just didn't test that.
We didn't think that'd be a break. So you always test the high priority stuff. And then what you do is you look at all the areas that could possibly or conceivably or likely be related to the bit of functionality you've changed. So for example, if you just changed a security setting, then you wouldn't just test that. The unit test should pick up all those, and the peer test should pick up anything relating to that security setting.
Yeah.
But you might then test some of your use cases around the security system. They're a bit broader than just the security setting.
Yeah. Instead of explicitly what that would enable, disable, anything else in security might be affected.
Yes, you might just check a few of those and add a few more use cases in from around that area of the system that were lower priority use cases that you wouldn't necessarily check all the time.
Yeah.
And then you might just throw in a few random use cases of things that you've not tested in a while, just to make sure they've not been broken in the meantime.
Yeah.
It's often not cost effective to test every possible use case.
Yeah.
So those are all the different kinds of testing we do. Your question is really about how do we do testing and how do you go about it. There's automated testing.
Mm-hmm.
We use testing tools for things like where you write code to test code.
Yeah.
Right? And those tests will run automatically. And you can actually do something called continuous testing, which is whilst you're writing the code, anytime you make changes, all the tests run and tell you if anything's broken. And they're very important in something called test-driven development. Pros and cons with that approach. The main con is that...
So would that approach be you're focusing more on the outputs of the code to make sure it's what you expect?
Yeah, what you do is you say, if I do this, the code should do this.
Yeah.
And you write code to do the thing.
Yeah.
And then test that the output.
Given these inputs, you should get that output.
Now, you can write very specific code, and this is particularly good if you're using concepts like dependency injection and things like that. But you can also do things that people might find surprising, which is you can actually test user experience. So what we mean by that is you can actually simulate a mouse clicking and dragging on Facebook, and then see that it actually, and test that it scrolls. You can actually simulate something as abstract as that in some testing frameworks.
And then have some limits to what you would expect and what would be acceptable.
Now, the advantage of that is you can encode a lot of good tests, and you can then run them all very quickly and automatically and detect problems without having to do any testing yourself.
Yeah.
As with IDEs, like we talked about last week, F5 debugging, it's one of the most wonderful things that's happened in development in the last 10 years. It's also the biggest curse.
Yeah.
Overused. And what I mean by that is people rely on it too much, so it's like, well, none of our automated tests pick this up. Okay, and to an extent, the solution to that is, well, add a test. So if something broke and it didn't get picked up by automated test, add a test. So it won't happen again.
Over time make your automated test more inclusive.
The downside is that what happens is that developers tend to write tests to test that the code does what the code does. Exactly like the problem with F5 debugging.
Yeah.
If you remember what I said in F5 debugging was that developers tend to test see that the code is doing what the code does, which of course it does.
Yeah.
And that doesn't necessarily eliminate anything. And the same thing can happen with automated testing, which is that you tend to encode the fact the code does what the code does. Now, good test-driven development and good automated tests will actually test use cases and make sure they sense. But they can also enshrine use cases that are not actual requirements of the system. And then when you add new functionality, what you end up doing is spending more time fixing the automated tests so that they no longer test what they used to test, they now test what the new functionality is. And that's a sign that you've probably got the wrong kind of tests.
Yeah.
But it happens all the time. And particularly with inexperienced developers, and developers are not really focusing on the right kind of automated tests. The second problem with it, though, is that you can never replace actually using the system and feeling it. And playing with it. And you can do things like you can simulate performance and all the rest of it, but nothing actually beats you actually looking at the code and playing with it like a user would do. And automated tests really cut down that amount of testing. They kind of say to the developer, it's all right, you don't need to bother testing it. And the problem with that is that means that they're not using testing as part of their thought process when they're developing, and their code tends to be worse. So there's a lot of negatives to just using automated testing. Automating testing, it can be good, but don't overuse it. So I'm stood on a very special, you can probably hear from the echo, stage, the Oldham Coliseum, and I'm here with a good friend of mine. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Hello, my name's John Edwards. I'm Development Manager here at the Oldham Coliseum.
And we're here today because every year we bring a lot of our new starters to learn how to do some presentation. What do you think that the Oldham Coliseum and this particular course brings to something like a presentation course?
Well, it's interesting. A while back, obviously chatting with yourself and other business leaders within the town and looking at how the theatre can kind of diversify its offer to the business community. Obviously, we have fantastic shows, there's opportunities for sponsorship, there's opportunities for all manner of kind of entertaining clients, etc. But after discussing things with you, one of the things you said you needed was around training, specifically around presentational style, and whether that be in a small meeting or whether somebody's addressing a large audience. And that fell exactly within the theatre skill set, and it offered a perfect synergy between businesses in the town and the theatre, and we were able to train up, mainly a lot of your young staff, around how to present confidently. And it's not, people aren't born natural, great public speakers. Lots of great public speakers are very nervous, but they're able to hide that through using some simple tricks, techniques, and a lot of those things are very similar to the skills that actors use every day on the stage here at the Coliseum.
I think there's something just really magical about giving people an opportunity to stand on a stage and do a presentation to their peers. But I think the main thing for us, one of the things we're dealing with a lot more regularly these days is mental health issues, and we're seeing a lot of our younger staff having anxiety and lacking in confidence and stuff. And how do you think something like having presentation skills helps people that are particularly anxious and lacking in confidence?
Well, it's a big issue, but I think it offers certainly the Coliseum, it offers a supportive environment to test this with other people who are just as nervous as you. Yeah. I mean, personally, I don't relish the idea of public speaking. I have to do it occasionally, and when I do it, I'm kind of chuffed with myself for doing it. So it's that opportunity to get up there, test it out, make mistakes. And, be in a supportive environment where I reckon, I don't know the exact statistics, but I reckon 90% of people don't particularly enjoy public speaking. Yeah. And so to be here with, to work with professionals who it's the day in, day out, is performing in front of other people, and to have a go yourself can only be a positive thing in terms of getting over that anxiety and kind of sharing the experience, I suppose.
Absolutely. Every year we take feedback sessions off people and we get questionnaires, and every year this comes out as one of the most favourite parts of the training for everyone, which is incredible considering most people come into this incredibly nervous. If other businesses want to come and take part in presentation training, how would they do that? How would they get involved, and how would they get hold of you?
Well, they can get in touch with me. I'm the person that sets up the presentation training. It's delivered by directors and actors at the theatre. And the best way to get in touch with me is either to ring the Coliseum at their box office, or to drop me a line on John Edwards at coliseum.org.uk.
Thanks very much, John. Well, Ofcom released a report this week saying that the number of mobile phones have, although they keep increasing, the actual number of mobile calls is decreased for the first time in 2017.
I think I've seen this. I saw this today.
It's despite the fact that we're getting more digital device usage. Obviously, there's other things decreased, like the number of MP3 players. Obviously, because people just don't have MP3 players anymore because they've got phones.
It's no Walkman, really, though, is it?
Your phone's not a Walkman? It's better than a Walkman.
It's not. I used to love my Walkman.
I used to have a genuine cassette player Walkman. Did you have a cassette player Walkman? Or are you talking about a Discman, like with a CD player?
CD one.
So they were technically Discmans, Sony Discmans.
That's because I'm still quite young.
Yeah, but the original Walkman was a cassette player. So, and I got one of the first ones. So my parents visited Japan in about 1982 and brought back a Sony Walkman and tiny cassette player. Of course, now you'd think it was massive and all the rest of it. And I remember just like, wow, just how insanely amazing that was.
You used to put the pencil in it and wind it up.
No, that's how you tightened your tapes. So if your tape got a bit loose, you'd just use a pencil to turn it to make it tight again.
I thought you could rewind it by doing that.
It's very slow, but you could rewind it using your pencil, yeah.
How else did you do it?
You just press the rewind button on your tape player.
Oh, yeah.
Generally. Not all of them, I mean. Anyway, this wasn't about Walkmans, this was about mobile phones. And I thought it was kind of interesting that we've seen such a decrease in mobile phone calls. What do you think that might be about?
Hang on.
I think people like message each other and emojis a lot more, don't they? And like say WhatsApp. I mean, do people even FaceTime that much?
I never FaceTime because I hate my face on it.
This is something that I think's been really interesting for me over the last 10 years because obviously I grew up in a time before mobile phones, never mind before FaceTime and stuff like that. And the dream of like video calling, you can see it back into the 50s and the 60s. It was always the thing that was going to like come along in the future and be amazing. And we live in that future now and nobody does it. Realistically, I mean, I know they always show pictures of you FaceTiming your gran and stuff, but like I don't FaceTime my wife, I get her on a phone call. But maybe this is just something that's taken a while to bed in. It's just surprising to me, though, because it was so sought after. It was such something that people were dreaming of. In a similar extent, like, I know we mentioned the iWatch and stuff, because I've got an iWatch and I've got one of the cellular ones. And it was the same kind of thing, that the idea that you could talk into your watch, I mean, that's James Bond level stuff, right? We're like, oh, wow. The other day, I've actually used it only once in earnest. Vivian was dropping me off somewhere. She took the car, and I left my phone in the car. But Vivian called me and said, you've left your phone in the car, which would be absolutely ridiculous normally, except my watch takes phone calls. So I could answer it on my watch and go, oh yeah, thank you, can you bring it and drop it off for me? And that was like mind blown kind of, I'm living the future kind of moment. But then practically though,
you didn't do it again.
Well, when do I have my watch with me that I don't have my phone with me normally? It's just not that common. And the exception would normally be like if I go on a run or something, which is what I thought I'd use it for. But I actually tend to take my phone with me anyway, even for that. So it's quite, I think some of the things that we thought were going to be really important or going to be life-changing haven't really had the same impact. And then stuff that nobody saw coming, text messaging. Who would think that, and its equivalents these days like WhatsApping and Facebook messaging and all the other messaging platforms, they seem to be much more prevalent in terms of a way of communicating. But then apparently young people now, for example, people don't use Snapchat anymore, they use Instagram because... And they don't send messages, they send Instagram pictures and stuff.
Well, I don't actually send... The only person I text, properly like text, is my grandma. Yeah. Everyone else I WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger. Yeah. So I don't even text people anymore, except my grandma, of course.
So there is these incredible social changes, but the key is here, if you're looking at the stats and the data, we're not only not FaceTime, we're not talking to one another anymore. We're messaging each other. At least that seems to be the thing. I don't know. I think there's a real worrying impact of that to society, because messages and text is not as communicative. The one promise that FaceTime has, for example, so video calling has, is that you can see somebody's reactions, somebody's facial expressions. There's a lot of non-verbal cues that come even when you're speaking to someone. And it's in that almost the hierarchy of communication. You've got face-to-face, or at least video speaking, then you've got verbal audio only, and then you've got written messages which not only lack the non-verbal cues, they lack a lot of the verbal cues that you just don't get in a written if you've ever sent a message and seen how easy it is for someone to get completely the wrong end of the stick. You're listening to DevDecoder Podcast. You can subscribe and like us on all the major podcasting platforms and YouTube.
And don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram at DevDecoder.
You can email us using podcast@devdecoder.com.
Or check out our website at devdecoder.com.
We love hearing from all our listeners, so make sure you get in touch and let us know what you'd like to hear about. Episode 12 is now completed. Did you enjoy that, Rebecca?
Always.
Apparently, number 12 is your favourite number.
It's my birthday.
That's why. Do you like your birthday?
I love my birthday. And Christmas.
And Christmas.
Yeah.
Basically, you like parties.
Yeah, pretty much.
That really doesn't surprise me. So, next time is, of course, the infamous episode 13. Look forward to that.
That's also my favourite number.
How can you can't have two favourites?
I have loads of favourite numbers.
It's not favourites then, is it? It's just you like numbers.
You can have two favourites.
Oh, you really can.
You can't. Like my mum says, like her 3 dogs are all her favourite.
You know what? Episode 13's already shaping up to live up to his reputation. So join us for that. I'm sure it'll be a very good one.
A very good one.